Hello, friends, and welcome to the Ed3 podcast, where we believe that education can be more accessible, affordable, and better accredited using Web3. So excited to have you today for our Ed3 Builder sessions, where we talk to people who are building the future of education. And we're so excited to have Beth with us today. She is a digital equity warrior who's hopping across the globe like a kangaroo, working to build the foundations of decentralized education. She's taking down restrictive government policies, constructing learner profiles, and building the future of the internet and education. So let's welcome to the stage, Beth. Great to have you, Beth.
Great to be here. Thank you so much.
Of course, it's so fun to have you. And I didn't give you a lot of background except to say I wanted to talk to you about digital equity, something that you have worked so hard on and in many different facets. So I would love to start by having you talk a little bit about what that term means to you, and then, kind of how you're approaching that and why you think it matters.
I think digital equity is something that we specifically saw coming to the fore during the past 2 years. But to me, it's part of what is a fundamental right to have access to education. Because of the fact that we're living in a digitized world, that just becomes a form for access to education. But essentially, it's meaning that everyone should be able to have the same access to education. There's a lot of different parts of digital equity within education. There's having the same knowledge base to begin with, there's having the same access to skills acquisitions, there's having the same access to competencies, as well as having the same access to obviously tools to be able to have the same ideas around education spaces. So there's a lot of different pieces that go into that. And I think we're going to see this topic compounded in the digital space through the advent of a lot of the different AI technologies we're seeing coming down as well, which just sort of complicates the ideas of access and limitations and sort of learner groups, communities, and things like that as well. But it's a multifaceted problem. And interestingly enough, there's a number of different groups around the globe who look at the most challenging situations in education and some of the most promising ones yearly, and they do a bunch of different reports on that. And for the past couple of years, the key factor that all of them are addressing or looking at is digital equity as one of the biggest challenges facing education globally. So definitely topical.
Well, that's great because I talk a lot about the promise and potential, and probably don't focus enough on the downsides, right, or the potholes that we're facing. So you've worked kind of all around the globe. So I'm curious, is this something that you're seeing everywhere? And if you want to pull out some specific experiences, whether it's in Australia or in Europe, like curious what you are seeing that's maybe consistent around different countries and maybe things that are unique to specific areas of the globe.
So everyone's doing things differently. It is a common issue, though. And I think, interestingly, we're seeing a lot of the studies come out of the last 2 years with COVID, which has been a crash course in digital equity, with pretty much everyone needing to have some form of digital access to education, whether that's via radio, via internet. In some cases, in Germany, fax, they're really out there with the technological advances. But it's been very interesting to just see all of those different areas of digital equity come into play. So it's not only about, do I have an internet connection? Am I able to access some kind of learning platform where I can have my resources or upload things or access things? Do I have contact with my educator? It's also things like, am I sharing a device between me and my 5 siblings? Is there 15 other people sitting around the table with me, or am I in my own room? Do the people who are helping me learn, so my parents or siblings, do they have the skills and the competencies to help me figure out how to use the devices or the spaces that I'm able to learn? And we saw some really interesting solutions, I guess. One of the ones that stays in my head always comes out of the States, where an entire district figured out that 80% of their kids didn't really have access to the internet. So they went and hired every available street sign and found routers and hung routers on all of the street signs and put them within sort of a 2-block radius of every kid's house for the first lockdowns and things. And there's a lot of ingenuity going into trying to solve some of these issues, but it's definitely something that we saw more strongly in the past 2 years. And the effects of it we've seen as well. In Italy, for example, especially within the first lockdown, they had a term coined for all the kids who had no access, and they were called the lost children. And they have entire policy then dedicated to try and bringing these lost children back after COVID. And they have an entire sort of separate track trying to bring them up to speed because they just did not have the access. They didn't have the ability to learn, to communicate. And overall, globally, we lost millions of children. There were millions and millions that were not talked to, seen, heard of for months and months and months, up to a year in some cases, which is just not acceptable considering where we are in terms of the digitization. And I think in terms of sort of equitable access as well, it was very difficult to see how much the access to education was solely reliant on individuals. So there's sort of the larger issues where some countries don't have really good internet coverage or so sort of some of the systems in place to support it. But even in some that were really well set up, it still came down to the individual teacher, it came down to the individual school, a decision of an individual principal. There's even situations where I know of two twins in separate classes where one of them had everything online and the other one seriously did have to print everything out and send it by mail back to the teacher. Same school, two different teachers. And so it's an issue that needs to be addressed at sort of not only the macular sort of level, but then and sort of yeah. Yeah. So
It's more than giving someone a plug, right? Like
yeah.
it's not access in terms of technical access. It's all these other pieces around it.
Yeah. I mean the technical part, obviously, a lot of that needs to be taken care of at a governmental level. There's things in place within the EU. There's different funding packages to try and get schools attached in pretty much all of the different countries. There's different things going on there. So that's trying to come up. Surprisingly, a lot of countries don't have good access into the schools with internet or not adequate. And a lot of them didn't have adequate access into homes as well. There's also been really good work done in trying to provide devices for children who didn't have access to those and things like that. So things like that are progressing at a sort of higher policy level. But there's a level where I think there's still a lack of understanding in terms of what's necessary. And that comes down to sort of the competencies and skills level, where we are demanding a lot of our educators and our schools, and there isn't a lot of support provided to them. And this is a global issue. Some countries or in some areas are dealing with it better than others. And there's always going to be teachers who are just fantastic and learn themselves or are able to learn themselves, are able to teach others. But there is definitely a lack of support for the competencies and skills bases that are necessary to be able to ensure digital equity. And there's sort of anything from digital literacy skills through to also digitization skills, understanding not only sort of how everything works within a digital world, but how to implement everything. And yeah, there's again, at a higher policy level, there's some work happening, but until we see that taken over into a lot of the teacher training academies, into any kind of ongoing professional development, I think we're still going to be waiting a while.
Tell us a little bit. You've worked, in Australia and the EU, and looking at not only digital equity in terms of what's needed around this, but also kind of where the education's going. These issues that seem global, but we don't really have a global body probably making decisions. So how are they kind of squaring that circle?
I think the interesting thing is seeing how everyone is attacking some of these problems, and the there are areas that are doing better than others, perhaps. I think predominantly I'm active within sort of Australasia, Europe, and North America at the moment, but it's difficult because I think everyone is taking it at a slightly different level. And the problem with education that we're always going to have is that every single person has a very personal experience with it. And so it's it's almost a personal affront when an area, a region, a minister, a person is told that their system is bad because they are a product of their system, and it's then a personal issue. And it's something that we always run into at this kind of level where it's been working, if it ain't broke, don't fix it kind of thing. It's been working. It turned out us, we're fine. And there's sort of a gap that's missing between then saying, yeah, you were fine, but the world's also progressed in the meantime. And the world that's coming is advancing so quickly that in order to keep up, we need to have been changing almost a decade ago. We've missed that boat. So now we will be playing catch up no matter what we do. And it's how we can make sure that catch up happens in the best way possible. I think it's an issue where I haven't seen anyone fix everything yet. So there's so many moving parts, and everyone is very aware, especially coming out of the last 2 years. Everyone's very aware of the gaps, but how to fill them is still an open question in a lot of areas. And I think different countries are just taking different focus points as to what they fill first more than anything else. And a lot of them have been working really hard on the infrastructure component now in the past years, because that was one of the biggest things that they could see and that could be fixed. It's tangible. I think some of the other open-ended things like the skills, the competencies, there's great frameworks. Some of them don't go far enough. So there's good frameworks in place in some aspects for some competencies that can at least be a good starting point. But there needs to be a much bigger move towards ensuring that there's just that continual idea of educating. So educating the educators as well. I think it's something that we're talking a lot about in sort of the Ed3 area as well, as how do we maintain learning? How do we learn in smaller segments? How do we make sure that everything that we're learning is then being certified? It would make such a difference if we could move through sort of some of the teacher journeys as well, being able to add little components of knowledge and skills and competencies into that, and have that just as a key part of the profession and be awarded for that. I think there's some interesting solutions for that sort of in the K-12 area. There's one I like out of Austria where the schools are, or anyone who does a professional development gets sort of a certification, then it goes to a school certification. So the schools can be certified as sort of gold, platinum, silver, etc. And as a parent, you can kind of see, okay, are all the staff continually interested in learning more? Are they getting certified for different things? And it's a nice way of at least rewarding sort of the school as a whole to say, yeah, let's all learn, let's all go and keep doing things, and they get sort of other bonuses and badges, and they all actually like physical badges they can wear as well. So, but it's an interesting model where in Germany, for example, the political level has specifically stated they will never make any kind of professional development mandatory, and they are very reticent to even provide time away to learn. And so I think it's something where we need to be just making everyone aware of the fact that it's not just the industry, it's not just sort of the working world that's going to need to continually be learning and challenging themselves with new skills in order to keep up. It's everybody. It's the teachers, it's students as well. The skills that we think we might be needing when some of our students are entering the first years of their learning journeys are not going to be the ones that we know they're going to need at the end then. And these are going to change as technology is changing, and it's going to be fluid, it's going to be fast, and we're going to have to be full and resilient with that.
So let's dig into the competencies and skills a little bit, because people are talking about skills passports and how do I get credit for my competencies, whether it's in the classroom or from other experiences. So do you see models emerging that are working, and are they able to go beyond national? Because I think the power of this is really anyone in the world can show that they have skills and then get hired anywhere else. That's the dream. So maybe what have you seen, and then what's maybe holding us back from that vision?
I'm seeing something taking place in just about every region around the world at the moment. So everyone's trying to figure out some version of a wallet Some of them are calling it a wallet, some of them are calling it a profile, some of them are calling it like a learning cloud. So different names, but a lot of them are in to differing degrees looking at how they can gather at least learner data. Some of them are then going into learning data. Some of them are then going into sort of holistic models of a learner. So in the very restricted version, there's a model coming out of Germany where they're looking, for example, at just having grades, essentially, and having some version of so that they're able to dictate who can see those. At the moment, though, because it's Germany, they're saying that it should be digitally supported, which means it's probably going to be things being scanned and uploaded. That's a very sort of minimalistic version. And then you have things that are coming out of like there's a version in Australia where they're really looking at how they can create sort of a holistic view of the learner and include other types of characteristics. So team capabilities, sort of thinking out of the box, different ways that you work together with other people, and being able to really have a more well-rounded view of the person as in not just grades, but how have I been in other areas, and also then flowing into other parts of your life. What other certifications do I have? So they were sort of looking as their first use case into the first aid certificate because it's something that you can do at school and outside of school and in the workplace, and trying to see how they can fit that in, but also with the idea that you share what you feel comfortable with then on the flip side. So you have this whole profile for yourself, but then you can choose what you share moving forward. So they're just about to start with a pilot with that in one state, is my understanding, but they've at least done all of the background work to really align all of the different competencies, all of the different kind of skill sets so that they can create that holistic picture. And you've got other things as well. An interesting one for me is the PSET Cloud out of South Africa. And that's one that's looking at the vocational college aspect. So they're sort of looking and using blockchain as well for that, and looking at how to really sort of measure all the different certifications, how to carry all of those different skills across, especially if you're switching between employers and going between any kind of trial work with somebody and then moving into sort of another field, or a lot of vocational colleges as well do placements in different areas, and making sure that all of those things flow back together. So interesting models, all at completely different stages, but definitely something that I see every government at the moment wrestling with and trying to come up with a good idea for. And so I think there's a lot of possibilities there to guide some of these discussions because they are in their infancy. And I think there's a lot of possibility to have really, really strong models in place. The general idea is that they should be interoperable or interconnected in some way. There's some ideas coming out of Europe where there is sort of a European standard that they're looking at for this as well. Countries will do their own thing, though, in terms of some of the data protection regulations that are just different in different areas. So you'll see some different versions, but there should be some kind of data set at least that could be shared at an international level. It will depend. It will depend what wins out and what's practical, I think. Some of the biggest issue I see at the moment in some of the countries is just that they're not thinking far enough ahead. So they're looking at what the technology can do now, and they're looking at how the workflows are now in terms of presenting a CV to somebody or getting your grades and ingesting them into some kind of system. And without thinking about some of the issues we're going to be facing in the future and the transient nature of a lot of the workers around the world, all of the different migration issues we're going to be seeing, we're already seeing, I think they're not thinking far enough. And I think they're going to be putting systems into place which are technologically backwards before we've begun. So they'll be able to replicate the current interactions, but that doesn't mean that they're actually digitally sound for the future.
Well, and I think that leads really great into, a lot of the work that you're doing right now around AI. So, for those who don't know, you are the managing director, is that the right term for
Yeah.
your job title, of the EdSAFE AI Alliance. So, Tell us a little bit about what that organization does, and then more importantly, you mentioned at the beginning, the challenges and potential maybe that AI brings, both in terms of digital equity, plus, like you said, maybe this technology being out of date by the time it's implemented.
Yeah. So the EdSAFE AI Alliance is a consortium of like-minded organizations. So anything from governments through to technology providers, through to smaller startups, industry representatives who are coming together to ensure that the implementation of AI in education is safe. And so for us, that means secure, that the accountability is clarified, that there's fairness, and that the efficacy of the tools is then really proven. And a huge part of all of this, and the whole reason we started the organization, was to ensure digital equity, because we saw already in so many aspects that the use of AI can at least limit certain learning communities. We all know there's a massive lack of open data to test with a lot of the different tools. And so one of the things that we decided to focus on, and we're going to be looking at over the next sort of 18 months, is developing a framework around the idea of bias. And for us, bias is a massive, massive issue. So I think one of the things with the EdSafe AI, I'm going to come back to that. One of the things with the EdSafe AI Alliance is we see so many different really great projects happening around the world that aren't necessarily talking to each other. And there's a lot of amazing work being done in terms of ethics. A lot of people are focusing on ethics, which is fantastic. But our whole entire idea was, let's bring everyone's strengths together. Let's bring all those projects together so no one has to recreate the wheel in their own respective geography. Let's try and connect all the different dots, see what's missing, and then work on it together so that we can have global benchmarks and hopefully maybe global standards for implementation and safety within the AI community. And a big part of this as well is the fact that just about every country around the world is currently developing some form of AI regulation, and education is being viewed in a very, very restrictive manner. And if that does move forward in that way, then we're looking at a very real issue for innovation, and we're looking at very big problems for smaller companies. And so it's important to help and support those dialogues with the policy and decision makers so that we can address some of those issues around the restrictive nature of the regulations, which on the one hand, we need some of those restrictions. On the other hand, though, we need to keep in mind what that could mean if we limit some of the possibilities and the innovation. So a huge part of what we're doing at the moment is our education work. We've decided to try and really unpack some of the biggest topics around AI. For the most part, at the policy level, it seems to be a black box where everyone's just scared by what it could be, but no one really understands what it is. And especially at the moment, nobody understands where we currently are, which isn't even half as advanced as they think. And so, the moment you say AI, there's all of the, everyone's going to steal our data and the children are going to be run by robots and, no one's going to have a teacher anymore and all of those kind of things. But if you look at how the world's heading, we're missing millions and millions of teachers globally. That is only going to get worse because there's millions heading into retirement and there's millions who don't want the job. So we're going to have a massive, exponentially growing lack of teaching staff. We will need some kind of digitally supported environment and learning system. And that's in just about every single country. And in that regard, it's not really about replacing teachers or not about trying to change or fundamentally necessarily change the education system at this stage. It's more about how can we provide the best tools, resources, ideas to support the education system to ensure, again, that each of those students has the right access, has the support, has that learning journey that they can go on from start to finish without being disadvantaged because their school only has one teacher left. It shouldn't get that bad, but there's
Right.
there's sort of more societal issues, especially when we're looking at things like the migration, the fluctuation that we're seeing, especially within Europe at the moment in terms of all of the Ukrainian refugees and things. We don't have the systems in place to support them. And it's it's not going to be a one-off. This is not the last time we're going to be seeing refugees moving, especially in the next decades. It's not the last time we're going to see some massive climate issue where we're going to have students with no school because it's been washed away by a flood or some other issue. And so it's how do we have the best tools that can guide those learning journeys, help them build on what is happening within the learning community. And a lot of those answers come back to AI because it is going to be able to lead some of those conversations in a very similar manner to the learning communities that exist currently. So that's sort of that's sort of the background of that. And then as I started mentioning as well, in addition to the policy work and the education work we're doing, we've really set ourselves a goal of looking at what's happening in terms of bias. And so that's looking at the technical side of things on the one hand. So how do we identify bias within the applications that are being developed? How can we help identify inherent biases, things that we don't even know we're building into the systems? And to this end, we're starting to develop a framework for identification that we're going to be implementing and growing together with a cohort of startups through the Global Education Startup Awards over the next year and a bit. So we're going to be developing the framework together with our members. And we currently have about 180 members in about 20 countries. And then we're going to be seeing how that plays out together with those who are currently developing new ideas in AI and education. And the whole idea is to try and sort of see, can we provide something that really helps work through each of the different steps of identifying inherent biases, learner community bias, things that would limit certain learning journeys just by their very nature. It's also then the other side of it is we want to work on a framework that helps lead the discussions and the implementations of AI. So looking at, as a teacher, what do I need to be aware of in terms of the information that's going into a system to be sure that I'm getting out of it what I need? And so it's looking and seeing how each of those different functions work and being able to have those conversations then. But that's a key part for us over the next sort of 18 months as we try and at least dive into that topic, because it is a question of equity. There are very real concerns in terms of the fact that a lot of our data for testing comes from very specific learner groups and very specific cultural groups. And it's obviously not going to replicate all learner styles, all learner communities, all learner journeys. And I think that's a very big issue that we're going to also have to address. And we're working with a number of different organizations there as well in terms of trying to really look at sort of more of a larger open data set. And I know that there's some work going on with Gaia X as well within Europe in terms of creating some of those bigger data sets that we can use for testing and having sort of those test bed possibilities or sandbox of possibilities. But they're things that we really need to be building now, because it's so important that when we are implementing these tools, we're not limiting the learning. We're not cutting off learners from reaching their potential, that we're really supporting, again, every single type of access to education.
So I think in summary, like thinking back to all these things you brought up, it's like there's different levels of digital equity. Like there's the systemic, we don't have teachers, right? Like we don't have someone to teach us. We have teachers, we have internet access, but I don't have a quiet place to study. There's a lot going on. There's socioeconomic issues. Then there's the actual, like the tool I'm using might be biased against me, right? It might not be equitable for what I'm learning. So I feel like there's kind of these like Russian dolls nesting problems, right? So I'm curious, as we kind of wrap up, like if someone's interested in this area of digital equity, where would you recommend them like starting to attack the problem of these, kind of different buckets? And are there people we can watch or listen to or connect with? You mentioned the program that you're launching with the startups that they should kind of look to or collaborate with to really get a sense of the space and how to help out.
Really good questions, and I'm going to possibly disappoint with answers at the moment. So,
You don't have a single
um,
answer for how to solve it.
look, I'm working on it. I, in terms of where to start, it's going to be where you are and where your strengths are. I think if you're working within the teaching profession, let's work on some of the competency levels. Let's make sure we're getting the professional development that we need. If you're working at the policy level, it needs to be about the access, the ability to learn, all of those kind of things. There isn't a one size fits all, and it is something where everyone has to be addressing this at each of the different levels. It's not going to work if one of these sides fails. So it is, as I said at the start, a really multifaceted issue, and and we are seeing progress, but it's just going to be where we see it and where there's a lot of fear, because there is a lot of fear associated with some of the technological advances. So it's how to address that, how to make sure that we are providing the best information possible to a lot of the decision makers. Because obviously, within education, for a number of the education years, we're dealing with minor data, and it's imperative that we have systems in place to keep that safe, but it's also then imperative that we help organizations and ministries and governments understand that there are ways to keep data safe, and there are ways to ensure that data remains certified. There are ways to help students have control over their own data and things like that. So I think there's a lot of education that needs to go into that as well, to really take away the fear aspect, which is winning a lot of the arguments at the moment, especially at sort of more of a societal community level. In terms of where to go for information, there's some fantastic organizations that have been gathering a lot of the data through interviews and different sort of surveys that they've been doing. And so you've got, I mean, I know that COSIN in the States, for example, did a fantastic job over the past 2 years in building up some of those challenges and profiles of what digital equity is and what it can do. I also know that Nesta in the UK, for example, has done a fantastic job with that. You've also got a lot of different studies coming out of even places like UNICEF and UNESCO, as well. So there's some bigger organizations to look at there. Definitely keep following the work that we're doing with the EdSAFE AI Alliance, because we're going to be focusing a lot on the topic of digital equity, and it's something that is a big issue for all of our members. So any of the members that you see as part of the organization as well, follow along with them, because a lot of them are really in the thick of trying to figure out the best ways of addressing this and implementing fantastic tools that do provide equity and keep everybody safe. So very interesting work happening with all of them as well.
Well, on one hand, it's really complicated. On the other hand, it's kind of inspiring to know, like, start where you are, right? Like, because it's so complicated, everyone has a role, and whatever
Yeah.
role you are at professionally, you probably can make an impact, which is also
Yeah.
empowering, I think, for our listeners. Beth Havinga is the managing director of EdSafe AI Alliance. It's so great to see you and catch up. She's joining us from an undisclosed location in the mountains of Norway, but you can find her most often in the metaverse, often in in the European Union working, but really connect with her, share her work, and support her as she kind of goes forth to try to work on these important digital equity issues. So, Beth, thanks so much for joining us, and we hope that your work continues going well.
You're welcome. Thank you.